4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio. Live from the heart of the downtown east side, it's Talk Recovery Radio with Giuseppe Ganci and Darren Gaylor on Vancouver's Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. From the streets to the studio, bringing you addiction recovery stories from real people with lived experience and real experts on today's issues. Tune in live every Thursday, noon to 1. Powered by New West Recovery. Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio.
Good afternoon, Vancouver. Hello, you're listening to Talk Recovery Radio. I'm here with Darren Gaylor, co-host. Hey, Darren, how's it going?
Hey, Giuseppe, happy to be here. Welcome to
Yeah.
Talk Recovery, everybody.
Yes, good to see you. Good to see you. Keeping busy and enjoying the sunny weather. And looked at the weather report. Looks like it's going to stay sunny for us for September 10th, which is Recovery Day's 10th anniversary. So Darren's going to be the MC on the stage at 6 and 6. Hey, Darren, you excited to do your role again of being our MC?
I mean, yeah, it's just, I mean, always been an honor and a pleasure to be a part of that. Like, you know, we were there. I was there, you know, when there was just a few hundred people gathering, and I mean, it felt important to me at the time. Now, with the amount of people that have been coming to that, you know, to our outdoor festival of Recovery Day, I mean, it's just such an impact. It's moving, really. Like, just to be a part of it, and
Exciting.
It makes me nervous all the time, but it that's just my own personal stuff. I mean, the reason for it, the purpose for it, far outweighs however I feel about being on a stage in front of so many people.
There's quite a few people. We're expecting some good crowds.
When I get there, it's exciting to see.
Yeah, I mean, you just get this like flow, just pumped for it. So go to recoverydaybc.ca for all the information. There's to celebrate the 10th year anniversary and to celebrate family. We've expanded the children's zone with its own stage, and you know, Canadian icon Fred Penner is going to be there. Some local children's entertainers like Will's Jams and Penny Pom Pom. So lots of activities for the kids. This is truly a whole family affair, and you know, there's, you know, everybody talks about how there's addiction in every family, and the overdose crisis has affected pretty much every Canadian family. And, you know, I'd like to talk about how recovery is also in families, and let's talk recovery in families. And you know, why don't we talk to our kids about what recovery looks like? You know, we're like, do you have a drug problem? You know, well, what about you know, turning that around? Hey, if you're having some problems with alcohol or drugs, there's this thing called recovery that you can try out. I think we really need to take a better approach on how we're dealing with addiction issues, because right now it's like, oh, you got a drug problem, stop. It's like, oh, well, you're having issues with drugs and alcohol, maybe recovery is something you could try out, and make it more pleasing and more, you know, attainable and funner conversation, I guess. I don't know, that's just my thoughts.
I would concur.
You would concur. Perfect. Awesome.
I mean, there is a missing link as far, I mean, for sure, as far as media concerns. And I mean, that media usually reflects the, you know, the societal sort of viewpoints and knowledge and where stigmas exist. And, you know, it's always lacked the amount of research and attention to, things like Recovery Day. You know, and just the fact that, you know, their liberal government wouldn't support, you know, the Recovery Day proclamation as being a day, you know, given to that. It's crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah. And that he's talking about motion. So I don't know if you know, Darren, but go to Recovery Month Canada com, I think it is. Let's just take a quick look. So we're launching that petition again. So it
Yeah.
was motion M40 before, and so the government, the House of Commons, didn't approve a motion to officially make September Recovery Month. So we all got disappointed about that. But our MP here, Peter Julian, is now, so it's recoverymonthcanada.ca. So you can go there, you can print out the petition, get 25 signatures, and put it in the mail for free. We're not doing the e-petitions. Apparently, e-petitions carry a lot of weight on social media for social change, but they actually don't carry any weight in the House of Commons. So we need paper petitions, and for every 25 signatures, we get 1 minute in the House to talk to MPs about motions. And so we think we could do it this time. We put more strategy on this. So you come to Recovery Day and complete a petition, not complete, to fill out, put your name on the petition, and let's try to get motion 10 passed. This is actually the third time we're trying to get Recovery Month in September proclaimed. And the funny thing is there's so many months for different things, like I'm not even going to list them. You go online, there's so many already out there, even like cultural and nationalities, and bike month, there's all this stuff, but like they've said no to Recovery Month twice. This is the third time. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio. There's a reason why we're on air. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Powered by New West Recovery. If you're watching us on YouTube, click subscribe. If you're listening to us on your favorite streaming device, awesome. Click like and share and all that kind of stuff. So get the word out there about Talk Recovery Radio. And all of our past shows are on talkrecoveryradio.com. And 8 years of shows. So we've got lots that we've talked about, but we've always got more to talk about. And we're going to bring in our guest for today's show. And Darren, who are we talking recovery with today?
Yeah, we get to talk recovery with 3 guests from St. Raphael's Wellness Center out in Winnipeg. Such an important topic specifically today, surrounding women specifically and alcohol specifically. This is information that, Colleen Allen, who is with the St. Raphael's Wellness Center, it says here that has been teaching this information since 1987, which tells me I probably should have been more aware myself of this information, which, comes down to the differences, both societally and biologically in women and their vulnerabilities, let's say, to the effects of alcohol. So I want to touch on what is it specifically? Like, this is women being placed in a gender role and identity over decades and millennia, that have required them and put women into a specific role, let's say, and I'm curious as to what the effects have been or what the results have been as a result of just that, before we talk about, the differences in just the biology. But just how did the roles that women became to know and be put in, how did that create a difference in the effect of substances and alcohol specifically?
Well, alcohol, it's Colleen Allen. What we found over the years, everything has changed now. No one fits in any particular role, and the patterns of use are really nothing that we have ever seen before. But once upon a time, in a place far, far away, what we had was that women were generally it was not acceptable for women to become intoxicated. If you drank like a lady, whatever that meant. but that meant that you did drink and that you did not show impairment, okay? Or you were very socially very looked down upon. So a lot of, for instance, up until the 1960s, at least here in Canada, in Winnipeg, there was no treatment. There was no such thing as an acceptable woman who had an addiction problem. At that time, she usually drank in secret. She wasn't allowed in the bars, okay, unless she was accompanied by a male. And that what happened is that she could get very, very sick, and nobody really knew what was going on until they would see her in a convulsion on the floor. And unfortunately, at that time, alcoholism was not diagnosed until autopsy, where they actually saw that she had cirrhosis of the liver. And as time went on, the fact is too, we didn't think we had many alcoholic women because they weren't being seen in treatment. You had about 1 to 10 in terms of men in treatment to women. And I think because naturally, women's bodies, for many women, can't drink. They get really ill, almost if they smell a cork. And that's, I think, and I'm not a nurse, but one of the byproducts of alcohol metabolism is a substance called acetaldehyde. And if I gave you a glass of acetaldehyde, what would happen is you and your porcelain temple would be in very, very close proximity for a long time. You would get very nauseous, you would sweat, you would get ill, and your pulse would be pounding, your heart would be pounding, your head would be pounding. Does that sound familiar? It's a hangover.
Yeah.
And so for many women, they could not use because they couldn't use enough to become addicted because they couldn't get enough down. And so when benzodiazepines came along, that was wonderful because then they were able to substitute that as well as alcohol and not become so nauseated. So that was a real issue. As time has gone on, of course, what has happened is that people just didn't understand. The women who were diagnosed and coming in were also coming very close to representing men. That is still, there is still a difference in terms of women entering treatment than men. But again, it's with all of the other drugs, it's not just alcohol, but alcohol is still the primary drink, particularly for women, because women tend to use legal drugs, like prescription drugs, rather than illegal drugs. Although certainly that happens, it's just not the norm.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic when we're talking genders. It's hard to say anything other than in a general way. And
Exactly.
Do you think it's an effect? I mean, St. Raphael's Wellness Center, this is for women only?
No,
okay.
We have gender specific groups.
Okay. And I mean, if I was to look in how many beds are available, whether individual provinces or across Canada or the United States, I'm always going to see a higher number of beds for men than women. Mm-hmm. Is this a result of when they look at numbers, like there's not that many women coming in, or is this still the effect of what you just described as a societal, thing where it was secret, that no women were given sort of, the conclusion that they have alcoholism, so it didn't exist? Like, is there still minimal beds for women as a result of,
Yes, there are.
Our history?
Yeah, one of the other issues for women, though, is that for them to be able to come into treatment is much harder. and in much more secret. Years ago, what happened, we used to have a separate house for women. That's no longer true in terms of our Shared Health and Addiction Foundation, which was the main source of women's treatment. And what happened is that women, if they came in a lot sicker. Okay, it takes about 5 to 7 years for a woman to show up clinically on average if it's just alcohol. And for men, it's 10 to 12 years. If women come in, they are not really supported to come in. They have to find a way to get out of their job. Childcare is an issue. And women just don't take time to heal. And many times they don't have the time to heal or be able to take time, and particularly in a residential setting. One of the things I think that also happens, I'll just tell you, is that years ago, because I did work for the Addiction Foundation of Manitoba for many years, women used to come if they came. They came by bus with a suitcase, alone, with or in a taxi. And while they were in treatment, they were getting calls constantly in terms of the kids, in terms of the husbands, in terms of their pushers. They would lurk outside for them. For men, because when I also worked, I worked across from the parking lot that the men were being admitted. They would come, and I make a joke of it, but they would come with their family, with cookies, with pillows. And I often teased and said, maybe they had their rubber duckies with them too. But literally, it was the support that they received in coming in. They came in with family. With women, like I said, they were often pestered. They couldn't even be in treatment until we finally said, as some of your centers would have done, is to say no calls. There's no calls. You can't go home for the first weekend because you never get back. Okay.
There's definitely like how one shows up to treatment has many stories, and then how what somebody does in treatment has many stories, and then leaving treatment. I want to get into the solution a bit on how to help women, but before we do, we've got two other guests in the room too. One wants to be anonymous, and all respecting those needs, so she's there. Taylor, are you still there?
I am.
Hi, Taylor. Welcome to the show. And we also have Elysia. Hi, Elysia. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
So without getting into, I always make this joke, step fours. And for those of you that don't know what that is, that's like, getting into all the details. So Colleen's expressed, her experience as a healthcare provider. Sorry, Colleen, may I ask, do you have personal experience as well with alcoholism and addiction, or are you just a healthcare provider?
I'm just a healthcare provider.
Not just, I shouldn't have said that. Sorry. Live radio. Yeah, I would have cut that out if this wasn't live. Well, thank you for what you do, Colleen. So we've got some lived experience in the room. Always love hearing some stories. So we'll start with Elysia. Elysia, welcome to the show. So as much of what Colleen's saying happened to you, what was your story when you showed up in the doors of asking for help?
Well, much like Colleen said, I didn't even show up to doors asking for help until after I ended up in the hospital with acute liver failure. I was 39 years old at the time, and I couldn't believe it. To me, that was what happened to 80-year-old men who drank 40 ounces of hard liquor a day. Nobody had told me that at 39, and I only really became a problem drinker at about 30, that this could happen to me. I don't remember much about my hospital stay, but I was given a 50-50 chance of even leaving the hospital. Then 6 months to live without a full liver transplant. And now I don't need any liver transplant at all. So the liver is an amazing thing. A lot of what Colleen said, I don't have kids of my own, but I do have a husband that is quite disabled. So I was a little atypical from the traditional norm. I was the breadwinner, but I was also the caregiver as well, right? So, and that is what's happening with a lot of women nowadays too. So it was a lot of emotional drinking and hiding it from my family, hiding it from my spouse.
So when you got out of the hospital, or when you did you have a moment of clarity in the hospital? Like, what got you? Did you go right to rehab after the hospital? Like, did you have more slips? Like, what was that process of like, hey, I have a drinking problem, I have to stop?
Well, I think prior to that, I knew I had a drinking problem.
Okay.
And I just become extremely apathetic about it. When I ended up in the hospital, I realized, hey, I do really want to live. So I didn't actually go into any sort of residential treatment. I did have to go live with my mom for a while because the stairs in my home weren't doable. So I had to live on my mom's one-story home for a while, and ended up in a small, much more manageable apartment for myself and my husband.
So you didn't go to treatment, which is great, because we always love to, this is powered by, New West Recovery, a couple of treatment centers behind here, Westminster's last door. But like, that treatment's not the only way to get well. And we always say, hey, you don't have to come to treatment. Like, there's a lot of ways to get well, outpatient and all that. So what was your piece that did you go to a counselor, a psychiatrist, just put the jug, what do they call it, put the lid in the jug, plug in the jug, there we go.
After my health had improved and I was actually able to be a little more mobile and get out of the house, I came to SRWC.
Okay.
I entered the women's specific program, which most people generally stay in for about 6 months. They couldn't get rid of me. I was there for close to 18 months. And now I'm a volunteer here. Like, they do a lot of great things. Yeah. So they definitely helped me maintain my sobriety, for sure.
I would hope that part of your experience and the detail of this story, is to, make change, allow for someone in your situation to not, who knows they're probably drinking too much, whether it's to a point of alcoholism or not, but to be unaware, that all of a sudden your first consequence or your first, conversation about your drinking is you have 6 months to live.
Yeah.
Like that's
and a huge message that I like to give people as well is, because I've heard it, they've been told they have 6 months to live, so they give up.
Right.
I with some hard work and taking the alcohol away, I bounced back. I didn't even need even a partial liver transplant. Right.
And that's the whole thing with addiction. Like, if you're a drug user and a consumer of alcohol, and you can live consequence free with a little hangover once or twice, then by all powers, we're talking about addiction. And that's why people need to stop, because there's a difference between using drugs and alcohol and then being 39, needing a liver transplant. Like, you get to this place where sometimes you just give up on yourself, and that's addiction. Addiction isn't just about using, it's about giving up. It's about, this is just who I am. And you know what, I got 6 months to live. And I just wanted to point that out, because a lot of times, when we talk about recovery, it's like, oh, we want all drug users to stop using drugs. No, we just want people that need to stop to know that they can stop. Taylor, you're on air with us as well. So welcome to the show. Did you have this moment of spiritual awakening where I have an alcohol problem, I am woman, I'm going to get sober, or was yours also, a trial and error, I guess you could say, like trying to figure things out?
Honestly, it all kind of just hit me all at once. Like, I was 28 when I was diagnosed with end-stage liver cirrhosis.
Oh, wow.
My doctor had told me that I had 5 to 10 years to live and that I would need a full transplant. So I was in a lot of denial about it for a long time. Like, For an example, I had a few of the symptoms and was very in denial about it, but I always kind of knew in the back of my head that something was wrong. And yeah, and the last thing I remember is waking up in the hospital, and yeah, I was diagnosed with cirrhosis. And yeah, everything changed very quickly after that. It wasn't easy, but being able to find St. SRWC was such a blessing for me, because I didn't feel like I had any other support really. Like I wasn't sure who to talk to, because I didn't think any of my friends or family would know. So having the people at SRWC the way I did literally made all the difference for me. But yeah.
And I mean,
yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention, I did need a full liver transplant. I did get it last May, actually, May 19th of 2021. So I am the proud recipient of a full new liver.
Wow.
amazing.
How much no drinking was in between the surgery and your last drink, I guess? Was that a conversation?
Yeah, they basically told me that I had to stop drinking or I was going to die, and that I wouldn't be put on the transplant list. So that is when I had my clarity that I was going to lose everything. And yeah, I had yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I'm glad that you got well. I got one more question. I'm going to hand it over to Darren for a bit. This is for all three of you. Wine, it's good for you, and the moms get together and they have wine, and it's harmless wine, and Europeans drink wine, and it's so organic, and you drive down the rolling hills of certain areas of Canada and you got all these vineyards, and it's just gorgeous. And I went to a kids thing on the weekend, for kids, and it was a big festival, and there's a vineyard attached to it, and in the wagon with all the kids, they're talking wine jokes with all the people in the wagon, and they want us all to go to the stop by the wine store on the way out for their organic wine. And it's just wine. So how does that make you feel? Like what do you feel the pressure, even though you needed a liver transplant and you got a liver transplant?
When I replay everything that I went through up until to what brought me there, it's just, and it may just be me personally, but it's just something that it doesn't really cross my mind when I'm out. But I also think that that is because I am so traumatized by the experience of needing a transplant, because to me, going out and enjoying wine like the way you were describing wasn't the norm for me. Mine would be going home afterwards to drink alone to hide whatever I was running from.
Colleen, do you think the wine world is a hidden epidemic?
I think it is, because that has been, remember when I had said you could drink as a woman, but you had to drink like a lady. And wine was always seen as a lady's drink. And so as long as you were drinking wine, I mean, what could happen to you? And I think that, again, people didn't realize that you didn't have to be intoxicated to be affected by alcohol that was in the wine. And I think that that is the misnomer that has really happened in the last while, is that some people would have heard that, yes, now the whole drinking, risk drinking is being changed, where it used to be 10 drinks for a woman and 12 drinks for a man. And now they're saying, hey, no alcohol in terms of the research, because alcohol is carcinogenic. And we've known that for years. And if you find the frustration in my voice, is that literally, like I have said, I have known this since 1987, and there have been studies done that you could Google in terms of women and alcohol, in terms of the effect of alcohol on women, particularly on women. So it has been very frustrating because I have done national and international resolutions on this. I belong to an organization, and I was president of Canada of the Business and Professional Women. And when I was in Egypt, where we had an international congress and had this resolution passed internationally. There were various countries that took this back and paid heed to it. It has been very difficult here to be able to, because I have approached the various ministers of various governments. I have even approached in terms of my own organization at the time and of our addiction network. It was never seen as something to pursue, even though I taught it. And for all of the courses that I used to do, because I was an educator, they never ever heard of this. And the fact that it caused breast cancer, that it could really up your chances of getting a tumor, particularly if you had a family history or suffered from breast cancer. It is just unconscionable that this information was never ever given to women.
Why? I mean, we don't have to go too politically deep here.
I think why? Let's look
I mean,
at
it's a legal substance. I mean, it's the whole thinking behind a lot of our struggles with our healthcare system. You know, we don't want to stop this. We don't want to make alcohol the threat that it is. We don't want people to stop buying it.
No.
You know, and yet this information that, I mean, I can just, you know, off the top of my head, think of how many, you know, of the people in my life that I know, or my parents' friends that have all recently passed away from cancer, far too young, you know, whether it's 60s or even 70s, you know, that no one is going to know whether or not that cancer was somehow instigated or influenced by the amount of alcohol they drank, whether it, you know, been drank in a very casual manner, 3 or 4 glasses of you know, wine a week or whatever. I mean, the latest publishment by the CBC, more than 6 drinks a week leads to higher health risks. New reports suggest, especially for women.
exactly.
And you know, this is a call out to not only, you know, women who are, you know, very much clearly drinking to an alcoholic state, but just in general, the information of the health risks by any amount of alcohol.
Right.
And
I think, yes, you're very right. The other issue that you have is that, yes, they're focusing on breast cancer because that resonates with women, okay? And colon cancer resonates with men because that is quite common. You're looking at the body, people's bodies, men and women being affected differently. But one of the things that is really not known and not connected, it's also connected to to heart problems rather. And you end up having a very flabby heart, okay? Because one of the things that you can do is that if you eat pure lard, okay, that's about the caloric value of alcohol. So nice things to talk about, but you hear one of the things that, particularly with women, if they say they want to lose weight and they talk to their doctor, then the doctor will tell them that maybe they should stop drinking alcohol or reduce their alcohol intake because of the caloric value, but of the carcinic value is never mentioned. The other area is just the kidneys. And you heard Alicia's story. Alicia's story, it affects the brain. It affects your neurological system. People don't realize that, you know, there's ascites where there's liver failure, where your whole stomach just gets blown up. And people used to joke about it for men and just saying, oh, he's got a beer belly. And no, he's got ascites. This is water retention. Yeah. You can
That,
feel it being
yeah,
strong.
yeah. I don't know how many times, you know, I've heard that joke about the beer belly and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
People laugh. It's
Yeah.
it's quite interesting though with society where we're at. So you know, we've talked about addiction in women and the gender role with alcohol and how it plays effect in a woman's life. So I'd like to talk about recovery, you know, and the role of recovery in women. You know, they do say, you know, there's a difference. What is that difference? So I know that you did some outpatient work at St. Raphael's. I believe recovery is a community. You know, it's. I wish it was just one thing, but you know, it's from what I had learned and experience. It's usually a community that gets people well. So for the person that's listening, that's got a mom at home who won't stop drinking, or the person that has a child and they're like, what has gotten into my kid's life? You know, how can the process start? And you know, so other than the work, like what did you do, Taylor, to get well?
Well, the most important part was getting a routine. I didn't have any of that before. So that was the most important part. Just implementing things in my life that just little things like that didn't involve drinking that I wouldn't normally do before, like going for walks or riding my bike, walking my dog, just everyday things that I'd never prioritized before. And then coming to like that was all introduced to me through St. Raph. I had nothing before coming. And just being able to, I started with one-on-one counseling, and then I got put into group where I was with other people who had similar experiences with me. So just being in that environment, I was able to take it out into my everyday life, and it helped me be more successful into the mindset I'm in right now.
Amazing. I'm just, you know, I think a lot about, you know, the history and this topic, and, you know, I hate to speak again in generalities, but, you know, assuming that there are a lot of women out there presenting themselves more together, or drinking that glass of wine in front of everybody else to show that this is all they're doing, but yet, you know, secretly drinking more. And, you know, the story is going to be, you know, similar to Elysia and Taylor's, that people will know and they won't be able to deny anymore when you're about to die. You know, it's hit this wall now. And what was it, if you know, both of you can look back, what could have helped, you know, intervene before that? Like an ability to go somewhere to talk about that, for family members to be more open. You know, what are some of the things, you know, that you guys experienced, but that could be, you know, maybe good information for listeners right now?
I think for myself, I had a lot of people come out after I was in the hospital saying, yes, we knew you had a problem, but they did not confront me with it, not either harshly or gently. You know, okay. Well, we suspected it. And I think had I really been confronted with that and known that they were aware and that I needed help, I would have been a lot more willing and able to ask for that help. I think a huge part for me in getting better was I was faced with it. I had no choice, but I had to ask for help. I had to reach out and say, I can't handle this anymore. Not just my addictions, everything else in my life that had gotten so far out of control because of my addiction.
Right. I mean, that's, powerful to say. I'm sure we've been in situations ourselves, as that person that notices something, but doesn't want to, cause conflict. And that's a difficult conversation.
And there's a genuine fear that that person that you want to talk to about it is just going to shut you out completely, right?
Right.
But for me personally, I can only say I really think that, and that's not in any way to put any blame on the people who didn't.
Absolutely.
I get why they didn't, but if that's one message I could give to people that can see it in their family or their friends.
Yeah. What about you, Taylor? If you were to look back in hindsight and, be able to go back in time, is there anything that, whether our healthcare system or friends and family or signs on a billboard that would have made a difference for you?
I'm going to be completely honest with you and say no. That's just me though.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to say no.
I completely understand. I mean, I'm well aware of the addictive mind. That's like, there's nothing that's going to change this steam train right now.
I have to interject here. So because we talk about this quite a bit, like, the whole, like, this is your life before drugs, this is your life
Right.
after drugs, don't do drugs. And people like, oh no, that doesn't work. It works for some people. It doesn't work for someone like
That's
me.
right.
But it worked for my sister who grew up in the same house. And she's like, yeah, she saw don't do drugs signs and she didn't do drugs. And I was like, what do you mean you didn't do drugs? Like, that means you have to do drugs, right? Like, my mind's backwards. So I just want to, like, there's this, like, you just never know what's going to work. And I don't know if any of you do 12-step meetings or SMART meetings or life ring meetings or whatever the case may be. But I always like so if you're listening from home right now, I just like, here's everything. I hope you find something that works, and it might be Jesus, it might be yoga, it might be AA, it might be reduced drinking programs. Like, just try all of it. And if you're content with your life and your kids are happy, like, life is good, then you're doing something right. So, Colleen, so over the years, since 1987.
Thank you.
1987. That's amazing. And thank you for sticking around and doing that work. And we hear about worker fatigue and there's a lot of you've been through a lot. Like, I can just imagine, people coming and going, and this isn't like working the front desk of a hotel, not to diss that employment role, but like, you get attached no matter what, you get attached. So over the years, has it gotten worse? Has it gotten better? Is it easier for a woman to get help? Like we are investing a lot of money, we as taxpayers. So what are your thoughts on that, the overall locally and nationally?
Okay, in terms of locally here, we're still caught with minimal beds for women, okay? There are many now for-profits that will help women, okay, and have women as equal part or at least some part of their center here. The problem is that for instance, our Shared Health, which is the former Addiction Foundation of Manitoba now, is that you have a few beds. And I don't hear of any real purpose from any of the people that may be able to do this. I would love, if I could get the financing for it, is to have a center for women. Because I think the wait times for women is really, really important in keeping them from actually accepting help. I know that people have come here mainly because they can't get into residential treatment, that treatment that they really need to support their sobriety. Also, what I do find also is that we have a mom's program here too. And what we find is that the system itself really works against women because, for instance, if they need treatment, there is a real push by CFS to say, well, all right, we're going to scoot your kids, or they have now been, if they're now in custody, you have to jump through all these hoops. But on the other hand, you have a system of social assistance, which here is EIA, who says, well, all right, we may or may not give you transportation. We may or may not, you've been going for 3 months. How come you're not well yet? Oh, gee, you're now sober. You've been here for a year. You can have your 6 kids back, but no respite to get to AA or other sources of help. So part of it is the system that surrounds women in terms of how they can access help. Because I was really told, story out of school, that there was this lady that did come faithfully, was sober for 3 months, and she was cut off her transportation, her bus pass. And when I went to lobby for her and advocate for her, the response was, well, she could walk to a treatment center near her home. End of story. The other thing I think that happens is that at one time, because it wasn't that acceptable for women to use, there wasn't as much pressure on them to use. And if you look at today, I often say, is that when you look at a person changing their whole life, and particularly men and women both, there is very little you can do today without being tempted to use, because it used to not be in the sports events. Now it's liquor's being sold. I remember going as a young woman to showers. You used to have tea or coffee. Now it's alcohol that's served, as well as tea and coffee, but there's also that pressure to drink.
A little bit of whiskey in the coffee to boot. Yeah, it's interesting.
You can get alcoholic drinks at the zoo now.
Nail salon.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, we went to this kids thing on Saturday, and I was just like, why are you pushing wine on everybody? Like, there's like half this thing is full of kids. Like, it was so inappropriate, not coming from a person with addiction issues, but like just it's inappropriate. Like, there's a bunch of kids here, and I don't know. I'm still stuck on that. I guess I need to get over it. But
well, you can go to McDonald's.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but then you get everything else. So from what I mean, it does seem like it's getting worse with all the information that we get and all the insight we get. It seems like there's just more blockades and more roadblocks and so forth. And I don't know what we need to do as a society to change that. I know Colleen's on the same page with us in regards to recovery oriented systems of care that build recovery capital to overcome addiction, using the entire community, not just these siloed systems of healthcare from harm reduction to abstinence that don't talk to each other. It's like, how do we all get into the same playing field where the abstinence community vocally says out loud harm reduction works, and the harm reduction community vocally out loud says abstinence recovery works too? Pick one or the other, but we're not there yet. And this crowd that you see in the back of us, that was Recovery Day in our local community a couple of years ago. That's what we try to do, is try to keep everybody in one space. There'll be naloxone training to 12-step conversations going on all over the place. I want to take a couple of minutes for Colleen. You've been a big part of the Recovery Day movement in Canada as well. You've got a Recovery Day coming up on the same day. Exciting. So can you give us a little bit of insight on what that is?
Yeah, and I think there is a real step afoot from yourselves and others to have it declared federally a national month. And I think that, let's move towards that, because the more people that are aware and see it as, you can really sustain your recovery. And it's, and it's acceptable, and people are recognized for the courage they have in changing their whole life, and that they're able to do this and then turn around and give back to the community.
Mhm. I always like this. Sorry, Darren. On that note, I always like to follow the gay pride movement. Everybody asks, well, why do we need it? Well, because we need to talk about it, because no one talks about it. And we get the same thing. Why do you do Recovery Day? It's like, so we talk about it because people actually don't know it exists. Like, unless you accidentally fall into it, or Uncle Gino at the table is in AA already, and he tells you, no one's telling you, so that's why we do it. So people get that, so when someone's in the hospital, dying, they already know that there's this thing called recovery out there, not like they need to Google it, type of thing. So we're trying to make it known. Go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, and just that there be a bed available, like
Exactly.
during that awareness, or during that amount of information, where, I mean, it's devastating, and unless there's going to be support and a safe place, right after that, it's what, back home to, to think about what I've done, and try to go to work the next day. And I mean, that is, man, like, I think we have so much more to offer our fellow human beings who are, whether it's their responsibility that got them to that spot or not, that they be given some form of support in healthcare, like the moment that a consequence is given light to their situation. And so I have, one last question for Taylor and Elysia. I mean, I'm an addict myself, and worked with many others, and that have hit devastating ends, life risking ends, where, they're told you use again and you're simply going to die. And it can move somebody in that moment, but a month, 3 months, a year later, it doesn't have the same amount of weight anymore. And I've watched people discount the things they've gone through, in their present decisions. So I know it takes a new level of inspiration, something more, to go on, other than just, I have to be sober because, I have a new liver, or, years later, it has to be something different. I wonder what it is for both Taylor and Elysia that's inspiring them today.
Well, for me, actually, when I was in the hospital, I found a few points. My stepmother asked me for a few points of inspiration. I was I couldn't walk without a walker, or without some sort of assistance. And I said, you know what? I had like a niece and a nephew, and a couple of nieces and nephews from friends that I hadn't seen because I was so in the problem. And they're all about 5 or 6 years old. So I said, I really, I'm Auntie Elysia, but I've never seen them. And I couldn't walk. I said, I want to be able to go horseback riding with my nieces and nephews. I still haven't done it yet, but I'm a better Auntie Elysia now. And I do find a lot of inspiration, and I really want to help others to get the help that they want, or that they need, and they do want. I mean, I wanted help back. There was a little part in my brain when I was apathetic that I wanted that help. I find a lot of inspiration in being able to try and help others with that as well.
That's amazing. Well, if you're in Winnipeg area, you can go online, find St. Raphael's Wellness Center, get some support. If you have a loved one that's using, there is help out there, and recovery is possible. I just got to keep trucking away and keep pushing the concept that recovery is possible. And if you're in the Winnipeg area, or you're in the New West area in BC, it's September 10th, it's Recovery Day in Winnipeg and in BC. And go to Recovery Day Winnipeg's website, recoverydaywinnipeg.ca, September 10th at the Forks. I went a couple of years ago, pre-COVID. I had a marvelous time. It was great to see all the energy out there. Best wishes on an awesome Recovery Day again, Colleen. I know you're a big part of it, and to the rest of your team, like, congratulations. Keep doing it. Get some of those petitions signed for Recovery Month Canada. Hopefully you'll have a booth set up to get those signed. And yeah, let's talk about solutions to addiction. It's one way out. Taylor and Elysia, thank you so much for being on the show and the courage to share your story.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.
And thank you to Colleen, who's obviously an advocate for women and recovery and you know, all that you've been doing.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio, powered by New West Recovery, live every Thursday, 8 years of shows, hundreds of guests, thousands of listeners. Thank you. And see you at Uptown New West 6 and 6 on September 10th for our Recovery Day. Darren's going to be the MC, so you can give him a shout out as well. And everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.